Thank you for joining us for the first in a series of videos designed for parents of Linfield College students. I'm Debbie Harmon Ferry, Director of Alumni and Parent Relations, and every couple of weeks I'll have a campus expert as my guest, and I'll ask my guest a variety of questions that may be of particular interest to parents. We're delighted to kick off this video series with Susan Hopp, Vice President for Student Affairs and Athletics. In that role, Susan oversees a variety of areas of the college, including residence life, Greek life, health, wellness and counseling, career development, multicultural programs, religious life programs, community engagement and service, and intercollegiate athletics. Susan is here today to talk with us a bit about how parenting a college student might be different than parenting a high school student, and in what ways you as parents can best support your students' development. Thanks for joining us, Susan.
Thanks, Debbie.
Well, welcome. So to kick us off, the topic was a little bit about how to parent a college student. Can you tell us, in your experience, having worked at colleges for several years now, how might parenting a college student be different?
Well, the biggest surprise is how much everything can change in 3 months, from high school graduation to the beginning of an academic year in a college. And basically, what happens is a transition from high school student to young adult. And as a college administrator, we look at our students as adults who make their own decisions and with whom we communicate about major decisions. And that's often very hard for parents who are used to having more of an active role in working with their students. So that's the key difference, is understanding that your son or daughter has an independent life in college with relationships with administrators and faculty in a different way than a high school teacher.
Great. I read recently something where it described the parent as a coach. Like, you may be on the sidelines, and once in a while you might be able to give a tip, but keep in mind that the student's the one in the game.
And it's hard, I think, in 3 months to sort of do that shift, because your son or daughter still needs a lot of advice, but then all of a sudden when they arrive in college, well, they may not want that friendly advice so much anymore.
So let's talk about that a little bit, and maybe what might be some extremes that parents may experience. One is you don't hear from your student much at all. So for parents who are used to daily interaction, do you have any, if you don't get calls or texts, do you have any thoughts or advice about that?
Usually it's a great sign that students are so happy and they're engaged and they're busy and they just don't have the time that they used to have to chat. What we normally say is try to talk with your son or daughter before school starts and say, how often do you want to be in touch? If you have the kind of relationship where your son or daughter texts you all the time just to tell you things, that's great. I would encourage them to continue to do that. If you see a change, that's when you might want to sort of ask them, hey, what's up? Haven't heard from you in a while. So basically, the first thing is to try to continue the same patterns that you're used to, and take your cues from your son or daughter. Now, if at any point you feel there's a real issue or there's something going on, that's when you should call us and we can maybe do a check-in or something. But for the most part, students are going to be excited and they're going to be texting. They don't call anymore, and God forbid they'd send you an email. That's so retro, By the way, that's one thing we do always want to tell our students. The college communicates via email, so read it. And parents should read the parents' email, too. Get a lot of good information that way.
If we don't have your email on file, we'd love to have that.
A little public service announcement.
A great way to communicate. Absolutely. So it's very different, for example, from when I was a student, which was many years ago, and there was a payphone down the hall, and you called your parents once a week. And
Sunday night.
Right, Sunday night always. So that's really not so much the norm anymore, though, with the age of cell phones.
Well, and texting. I think most students are in contact with friends and family far more frequently than we ever were in college. So that's why I say, think about the patterns, what's normal for the way you and your son or daughter communicate, and then check it out, make sure that's sort of what they want to continue to do in college, and then if there's any significant change, that would be the only time to really wonder what's going on.
Now, I think sometimes it's the case that students most often will think to call or text home when something goes wrong. They may not remember to tell you every time they're having a wonderful time, but if something goes wrong and they contact the folks at home, have any advice about what parents can or should do in those situations?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think what you're saying is true, but a lot of times if a student is not doing well academically, they won't tell their parents because they don't want to disappoint, or they think they can resurrect this terrible grade, or they don't know how to manage all of a sudden getting the first C they've ever gotten in their life. So if it's a personal social issue, a roommate conflict or some relationship issue, I think students do tend to call their parents. And then just do what you would normally do. I mean, be a support person, be a really good listener. I mean, that's the most important thing. You can't resolve issues that are happening here on campus very well, but you can listen and sort of see if your student is problem solving on his or her own. I mean, that's what we really want to see, is some steps being taken where students solve their own problems and look to find resources and communicate with the appropriate people, whether it's just a roommate or whether it's a faculty member. We cannot disclose grades or discipline issues or anything really that is a protected student record.
And is that a Linfield
That's a big
decision?
shock. Oh no, that's a big shock to every parent across the United States. It's related to a privacy act called FERPA, and you will hear that term quite a bit, the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act. Students can waive this, so if you want to have a conversation with your student or ask them to sign it, it's completely up to the student. And then if the waiver is signed, we can communicate about anything.
So even if the parent might be paying all or part of the
I know,
bill,
that's the
if
conundrum.
the student's in trouble, you're not going to call or email the parents.
There's one exception, when there is a severe threat to a person's safety, then we call.
Okay. Other than that, so how will the parents know how things are going on campus?
They hear from their student how things are going, or through, general updates about the college. Basically, the assumptions should be that all is going well.
You bet.
They're going to have some little bumps along the way. They might get that first C or D that they've ever experienced. Remember, most of the students at Linfield are used to being, big fish in littler ponds, and they come here and everybody's a big fish. So everyone's successful, everyone's done well in high school, everybody's involved. So it's navigating and finding their place, their community.
And that's natural. Those bumps are normal.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't make them easier, but they're normal.
That's right. How about visiting home? Is it a good idea to encourage students to come home for the weekend, or what would you recommend?
Well, I have some pretty strong feelings about this, because students who are distracted from what's going on in their college community. We're a residential community. We want students to stay on campus, and the problem for us is that most of the time it's easy for students to get home if you're from the Seattle or the Portland area. And we advise students not to go home, because when you're gone, you're not participating in what's happening on campus, or hanging out with your friends, or going to a movie. It's just part of the collegiate experience. And that's a terrible message to send to parents, because you miss your child, you want to find out in person what's going on. That's what Thanksgiving's all about, that lovely long weekend where you can really spend quality time together. So, I would not tell a student not to go home if they're miserably homesick, but for the most part, leave your high school friends behind and start making your own set of college friends. And that definitely applies to the girlfriend, boyfriend that you left at home.
Yeah, sad. Hard to hear maybe, but probably.
Yeah, it is difficult, but I think it's really for the best interest of a student to sort of get rooted and get planted here.
Great. How about what kinds of, you said, sometimes students call home when they're having a social issue or a roommate issue or things like that. what kind of resources are available for students, and how would parents know that in terms of helping direct the students to those resources?
Well, we have a lot of resources available. I mean, 98% of our students live on campus, so students, if it's a residential issue, a roommate problem, a social problem, they should start with their RA. It's easier to talk to an RA, it's a peer advisor, they've been through extensive training, and they can help guide a student and how to resolve sort of the smaller issues. We have a chaplain who is a counselor if a person is sort of struggling with a religious identity, which often happens during the first year of college, and or any other kind of personal, social questioning or seeking. We have a wonderful counseling center and a health center, and they work hand in hand. So students should not, number one, never feel embarrassed about asking for help, and we know they will. So the biggest thing parents can do is encourage students to use the resources here, and to just really be a good advocate for your student asking the right questions and talking to the right person. Another resource that is excellent that students don't think about is the academic advising office, because a lot of stress and concern over grades can be just talked through with the professional advisors who can give them tips on how to either get some help through learning support services or how to take tests better, how to reduce their anxiety about performance. There's a lot of stuff going on when you make this transition.
I'm actually very happy to hear you mention some of those folks, because some of them will be our guests later in this video series. So we'll talk to Jeff McKay about housing. We'll talk to somebody in academic advising.
Excellent.
Delve a little deeper. I know for a lot of parents there's a big question surrounding alcohol and the prevalence of alcohol on a college campus and concerns about that. What can you tell us about that at Linfield?
Well, alcohol and other drugs, marijuana, we've seen a big increase. But I've worked on several campuses, and I can say with at least the confidence of my own experience that Linfield does not have any more alcohol or marijuana-related situations than any other college campus. The challenge is for students to be confident in who they are and to not be distracted by something that their peer might ask them to do and they don't want to participate in. Our biggest challenge as folks working with students is to help them resist social pressure, because it's a really interesting time. Students are trying to figure out who they are. They want a new identity in college. Sometimes they succumb to peer pressure, and we try to give them the skills to not do that. So I guess to sum it up, alcohol is available. It always has been, always will be. It can really derail a student's career, both from a legal perspective. I mean, it's very expensive to get an MIP or to have to work with getting those kinds of things off your record, but health-wise too, it can be problematic. So I would suggest that that folks have a sincere conversation with their son or daughter about, so what are you going to do when you run into this situation?
Sure.
And test it out, because they will run into it.
You bet. Yeah, I've heard at other conferences where they say the work you've done in the last 18 years as parents has more to do with how they're going to respond to that than anything we can do in the next 3 months.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Great. Thanks. Now, you yourself are a parent, and a parent of 3 grown young ladies who are now all off in college or beyond college. Some of our parents will be experiencing going home for the first time to a very quiet house. Having been in this situation, do you have any recommendations or advice for them about that?
Well, it's really different. You won't spend half your time at the grocery store anymore. It's amazing. Yeah. It's like 1 gallon of milk lasts forever. You just have so much more time, and it's interesting. You have to sort of figure out, okay, what's the next phase of my life going to look like? And I know I have seen some parents who can't navigate that and try to go to college with their student, especially the last one, because, this is this is the last time you'll experience that. But I think it's a great time to do all the things that you always wanted to do, check out the bucket list, read those great books, and just enjoy the fruits of what you've done for the last 20, 25 years.
Absolutely. I think at that same conference, I think I heard somebody say, if you like the student that went away to college, chances are you're going to love the adult they become.
Oh, it gets better.
Yeah, it gets better.
Yeah, it gets really much, much better.
Terrific. Well, I think those are all the questions that were submitted. Is there anything else you would want folks to know?
Well, I think it's important to know that we are serious when we say we partner with parents for student success. But sometimes it's hard for parents to understand what we can and can't do. So we have a model called sort of challenge and support. We really challenge students to be who they are and to take responsibility for their own learning and their own personal development. But yet we're here to sort of nurture and grow and not be too obtrusive. So, it's
a balancing act.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act. So, and parents can call at any time and ask questions. We will usually say, well, hypothetically in this situation, because we can't talk about individual student situations. But I think really to value the kind of environment this is where people, faculty, staff really do care about the success of each student. Mm-hmm. So we have to tell the students, we really do know you, and if you're not in class, your faculty really will call and ask us to check. So, I mean, it's that kind of environment.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
As a parent, that's reassuring.
Yeah. It's really it's exciting
Good.
For students to be launching their next phase in life.
Well, thanks so much, Susan. I appreciate it, and I'm sure the parents do too.
Thanks, Debbie.
And our next guest will be Jeff McKay, who's the Director of Housing, Residence Life here on campus, and we'll be talking to him about that, his area of expertise and what that looks like on campus and some learning outcomes for our students, since there are so many students who live on Linfield's campus. So if you have any questions in that area, please feel free to send those to parents@linfield.edu, and we'll do our best to address those for you. Thanks so much.